Here in the second screencast, I'm going to actually be doing some things in Excel, demonstrating some features and kind of just showing you how to solve problems that you may be faced with. And not that you're going to, learn everything that there is to know about Excel, but at least your mind will open up and you'll kind of understand what Excel can do so that you can go figure out how to make Excel do what you need it to do when you're faced with a problem. Another thing I want to mention is that Excel is such a complex tool, and there are often several ways, 2, 3, 4 different ways to do the same thing. And so I may only demonstrate one way, but you may know of another way, or you may figure out another way. And that's certainly, do whatever works for you. That's very common. So what I have here is a spreadsheet that is let's say it's an inventory spreadsheet, let's say, or it's a sales spreadsheet, I guess, because we've got a column for total sales of an equipment company. And so I want to show you a few things in here. First of all, I want to delete this picture that I set up in the last screencast. First, I want to show you how to write a formula. And so we may have covered this earlier in the semester in another screencast, but the easiest way to write a formula is start with an equals. We want to do the quantity times the price. I'm going to do equals, go over to the quantity column. That'll put in the C4 times the price, and times is the asterisk key, and then hit enter. And then we've got our formula here. Now to get this formula down to the rest of the data, you can grab this fill handle with your mouse and select it and pull it down. Or I like to use the keyboard, so I'm going to use the shift and the arrow key, or I can use the page down key with the shift until I get to the bottom, and then I'll do Control D, which stands for down, fill down, to fill in the data. And so the formulas change to reflect the data that it needs to reflect as we move down the different rows. Now you'll notice when I'm down here, though, I don't know what these columns mean anymore. I lost my headers. So let's scroll back up. Here's how you deal with that, is you can use the freeze panes function. And so here it is right here, freeze panes, and you can say freeze the top row, freeze the first column, or just freeze panes. Now if I freeze it where I am now on A4, it'll freeze the column headers up there exactly how I want them, so that no matter where I go scrolling down, those stay the same. Now the way that freeze panes works, I'll unfreeze it here, is it always freezes above and to the left of where you are. So maybe I want to freeze the panes right here because I've got a lot of columns as well. And so then when I'm scrolling to the right, you'll notice that the columns to the left are frozen, and then when I scroll to the bottom, the row at the top is also frozen. In addition to freeze panes, there's also a way to split the screen, and so you can do split, and now it splits it into 4 different panes. It's not 4 different worksheets. We're still in the same worksheet, but each of these things then works kind of independently of each other, and I find it more confusing than helpful because you can get screwed up in a real hurry. But you'll notice I'm in the same cell in 2 different panes now, and so if I change this, it changes it in both. I'm kind of viewing the same thing twice, and so sometimes that's helpful if you want to look at data that's not real close together. If you've got a ton of rows and you want to see 2 things that aren't anywhere near each other, that's the only way that you're going to have to do it. But as I mentioned, I find it more confusing, so I very rarely use the split. I will typically use the freeze panes, which is why I have it up here on my quick access toolbar. So then my panes can be frozen. Another thing that we can do is we can add filters. And so on the data menu, you'll see this filter button, or I've got the filter again up in my quick access toolbar. As long as our data is all in adjacent cells, which this appears to be, if I click filter, it'll put these little arrows, little list box symbols up here next to each column. If your data is not in adjacent cells, like if you've got, let's say we've got a gap here, if we do filter now, these cells won't be included in the filter. So what you can do then is you can just select the entire area and choose filter, and then those will be included in the filter as well. Now what a filter allows you to do, and let me show you a couple things first of all that I just did. An easy way to get around in Excel rather than page down and then oops, now I got to arrow up. If I want to go to the bottom row, I can just push the end button, and you don't hold the end button, you just push it, and you'll see down at the bottom of the screens it says end mode, and then I push the down arrow key and it goes to the bottom of whatever range I'm in, as long as there's no gaps in my data. If I do end and then to the right, it goes to the right. If I do end to the left, it goes back to the left, or end up, it goes back to the top. And so that's a real quick way to move around in Excel. If you do Control Home, it'll bring you to the top left of your data range that you're in right now. Oftentimes it'll bring you to the top left of your worksheet, but since we froze the panes, it's bringing me to cell A4. So that's kind of handy. Another thing that I use a lot, in addition to the keyboard, is let's say I want to insert a row. Okay, to select a row, you do Shift and then the space bar. Well, then on most keyboards, if you have a Logitech keyboard, I find that this isn't always the case. But most keyboards, down by the space bar, you've got an Alt key on the right side and a Control key on the right side. Usually between them, there's a button that when you push it, it acts like you just right-clicked your mouse. And so that's a way that you don't need to pick up your mouse. And then if I want to insert, you'll see that insert here has there's a little underline under the I. Then I can just hit the I key. So I inserted a row without ever using my mouse. To delete a row, I'll just do Shift space, and then I'll use that button again and do the letter D for delete. Now, if your keyboard doesn't have that button, that context menu button, I guess is what I would call it. If it doesn't have that button, another way that you can achieve the same thing is to do Shift F10. That works on any keyboard. So if your keyboard does not have that button, and if you're working on a laptop, the button moves around a lot, but every laptop I have has that button on it. The only place I've not seen that button is on certain Logitech keyboards, or sometimes they hide it and make it, you have to do a function and a print screen or something. But Shift F10 will do the same thing, and then you don't need to use your keyboard. So just some more keyboard tips. Now, what these filters allow you to do up here, let's get back to that, is let's say I only want to see tenths. Now that I've added filters, I can say, okay, show me just tenths. And you can either turn off the things that you don't want to see, or if you just want to see tenths, you can just type tenth here, and it'll automatically only pick tenths, or you probably could have just typed even something shorter, and now we only see the tenths. And if we want to go see backpacks, we can turn backpacks on and turn tenths off. If we only want to see backpacks that had more than 10 or more orders, we can go over here and say, show me the ones with 10 and 12 orders. And on here, you can also clear the filters by each column, or up at the top, you can clear all the filters by clicking here on the data menu, or I have that in my quick access toolbar as well. But that can be kind of handy. Other things that you have on here is you can sort pretty easily. You can sort on one column by A to Z. So now we sorted this column A to Z, or we can sort Z to A, or we can sort back by order number, which I believe is how it was originally. So we get back to how we had it originally. So some pretty cool things that we can do using filters, and I highly recommend using filters where you can. They can be really, really handy. Now next week we'll get into doing pivot tables, where we'll look at how to look at this data in an even more complex way. Using pivot tables, kind of see the summary all in one spot. But filters can be handy if you just want to see certain data. And now in Excel 2010, you can even filter by color. So let's say that I color some of these cells different colors, and maybe some of you do this too. I want to color the things that I want to look at later in red, or if they look out of range or whatever. Well, now you can filter by color, so only show me the blue ones, and now it only shows me the blue ones. So some pretty handy tools there using filters. I'm just going to undo that. The last thing I want to show you on this screencast is, if you recall earlier when we looked at the print preview, the pages 3 and 4 were just kind of the rightmost columns, and really we normally would want that on page 1 and on page 2 with our data. So And one way we could do that is we could flip this to landscape. So we could go to page layout and change the orientation to landscape. A couple other ways that we can do this is we can say set the width always to be 1 page. Okay, and it'll automatically scale this down to 87%. And so that now we're down to 2 pages, and we did that with just one step, is now everything's on 1 page. Another way that we can do that is, let's go back and set this back to automatic, and then we'll put this back to 100% so that it's how it was before. You see this little dashed line here? I hope you can see that. That's the page break. That's where the page is going to break. And so we know that these 2 columns are going to be on their own page. But there's a great way that you can switch to page break preview down here, and you can see it even more clearly. So this is page 1. Let me make this a little bigger. Okay, and you can kind of see where it says page 3 here, and then page 2 is here, and page 4 is right here. But if I want this on 1 page, I can easily just drag this over here, and so now that's all on 1 page. And if I don't want this to break right here, maybe I want it to break up here above the tenths. Let's keep all the tenths together. Now that's going to be on page 2. And that's pretty handy. You can just drag around your page breaks however you want to handle them here. Other things that you can do when you're printing, you can of course change the margin, the orientation we talked about. So let's make it landscape now and look at the preview. Now we're on to 3 pages. Okay, why did it break so funny there? Well, it's because we inserted that hard break when we moved that thing up to keep the tenths together. Now it broke onto a 3rd page. So the dashed line is where we set it to break. The dark line is where it would break on its own. Or maybe I have that the other way around. The dark line is where we set it, and the dashed line is where it figured it should break. So we can say reset all the page breaks, and then we'll be back to 2 pages. We've got a little bit on a 3rd page actually. But if we don't want that, again, just drag this down, and now we've got page 1 and page 2. And it automatically fits on 2 pages. Something else you may have noticed when we went to page 2, we lost these headers up here. So again, another way when you're printing, just because you froze the panes on the screen doesn't mean that it will freeze them when you print. And so the way to handle that is on your page layout tab, you can say print titles, and a couple different ways. Let's say I just want row 3 to repeat at the top. I always just type 3 and then two dots and then another 3 and then click OK. And if you go back in there, you'll see that it formatted it how we want to. Another way that you can do it is just click that little thing at the end of the row and then say, okay, I want rows 1 through 3 to repeat at the top. You can make the columns repeat at the left. And now if we preview it, rows 1 through 3 should repeat at the top of every single page. And so then we've got the column headers on every page. If we do it how I mentioned first of all, where only row 3 repeats, then this saying here, Outlook Equipment Company won't repeat, but at least the column headers will. So that can be useful. So hopefully you learned a few things here, especially about data filters in this screencast. I'll carry on with some more demonstrations in the next screencast.